Episode 4.
Are you ready to take your eBay business to the top? Well, if so, buckle up and hold on. It's time once again for So You Want to Sell on eBay with your hosts, Ron LeBeau and Ali Young.
Creating an eBay store these days is not that difficult a task. Creating a custom eBay store is. So if you're thinking of starting an eBay business, or even if you're a titanium power seller, let the professional team at AuctionProTemplates.com create a custom eBay store for you.
Welcome once again to another episode of So You Want to Sell on eBay. I'm Ron LeBeau.
And I'm Ali Young.
All right, super sellers, let's get started. I'm simply thrilled to introduce to you our special guest today, Tim Knox. Tim, are you ready to inspire?
I am ready to inspire.
All right, then. Tim is a serial entrepreneur, speaker, talk radio host, consultant, and mentor to many entrepreneurs. He has successfully launched ventures in a variety of industries, including web design, custom software, internet marketing, media, publishing, and retail. Tim was also one of the first eBay experts with his eBay Mastery program and has taught dozens of seminars and hundreds of students how to find success selling online. I've given our listeners an overview of you, Tim, but they want more. Before we dive in, let's see if we can find out a little bit more about you personally. Our listeners want to know anything and everything you'd like to share about you, whether it's family, hobbies, or just anything else, Tim.
Sure. Yeah, I am married, 21 years now. I've got 2 daughters, no sons, unfortunately, but I do have 10 dogs to make up for that. So that's how I spend most of my time. We actually do small dog rescue here, so I usually have a house full of boarders.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm the same. I have 4 daughters, and I have a sausage dog. He's the only male in the house as well. So I understand your problems.
Well, they say that men who have daughters deserve them. So it goes back to our sordid past, I'm sure.
Yeah, it also teaches you patience, is what I've learned.
It really does. It does.
Yeah.
You learn a lot from your kids and from your dogs, Ali.
Yeah, especially women, because they tend to take a little bit longer. They do in my household anyway. Well, before we start each episode of So You Want to Sell on eBay, Tim, we always like to ask our guests to tell us about one person that sort of made a real impact in their life. Someone with such an impact on you, it can be either positive or negative, that sort of helped you through your journey. So, Tim, tell us, who's your impact person?
Well, you've probably heard this before, but I'm going to have to say it's my mother.
Yeah, we have.
My mom has always been very supportive. I come from a very poor Southern background, and my mom was one of these women who literally would work from daybreak to dusk and still have 3 meals on the table, and had to quit school in the 3rd grade, believe it or not, to go to work. But she's one of these ladies, very positive. Always told her children, you can do whatever it is you want to do. Just set your mind to it and go do it. And as a result, all of her children are entrepreneurs, and we're all pretty successful, and we take very good care of Mom. So she's been quite the inspiration.
Wow. Which kind of explains a book you've written, right?
It does, yeah. My small business book, Everything I Know About Business, I learned from my mama. And it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek business book. I do some stand-up comedy. I do some corporate speaking, and I've always had kind of a sense of humor. So when I wrote a small business advice book, I thought, well, who better to blame this on than my mother? And so that's what that book was. It was kind of a humorous look at how to start a business. And kind of a funny story, I actually took my mother to a book signing. And someone came up to her and said, Ms. Knox, would you sign this book? And she goes, well, sweetheart, that's a brand new book. You don't want me to write in that. So it was pretty good, I thought.
Yeah, exactly. Gotta love Mom, right? All right, well, Tim, now that we know a little bit more about you, let's take a look at your journey to and through your business success. I mean, obviously you've had great success, but we're going to dig in now. We're going to see how it all happened, because we want to hear of your failures and your successes. Our listeners need to know that you've been where they are and that there's good news if they're determined. So we all know that success rarely comes before failure. So, Tim, if you would, tell us in great detail of a particular failure that happened on your journey that may have had you second-guess whether or not you should continue pursuing your business.
Well, it's really a great question. And, I teach entrepreneurship and have for many, many years. And the one thing that I always tell my students is, you can actually learn much more from a failure than you can a success. And one of my, I guess you could call it a failure because it resulted in the business closing. I was actually in the retail gun business for many years and had one location and was really, really successful, and then started thinking about expanding. I opened a second store with a partner. And I should have known better. I'm not a great fan of partnerships, but the partnership did sour. The second location did not do nearly as well as we had hoped it would. And so we kept it open for about a year and a half, and we finally closed that location, and because it was really just a money suck. All the money that the first location was making was going to keep the second one open. And we found ourselves just kind of surrounded by dominoes, as they said. Things just started falling. The second location we closed, and the impact that had on the first location, eventually we had to close that store as well. So, that was a failure in the sense of I've probably started a dozen businesses. That's the only one that I've ever had to close. But I learned so much from that failure. When I go back and look at that and kind of dissect what happened, do an autopsy on the dead body is what I call it. I can see where there were certain things that I knew I shouldn't have done, but against my better judgment, I did them anyway. Again, going into a partner for a second location, opening that second location in an area that really wasn't that great. And just a lot of little things, you look back and you learn those lessons. But see, the beautiful thing about failure is you learn from it.
Absolutely.
When you succeed without any kind of problem, you don't really learn a lot. And you kind of start to think, hey, I must be special.
Right.
I've got that magic touch. I've got that Midas touch. But when you have a business that, is really popular and successful for 4 years, and then all of a sudden it starts to dwindle down, it's very humbling. And that's when you look back and you learn a lot about business and about decision making. And, the biggest lesson that I walked away from was, you should trust your gut. That first gut feeling is usually the right one, and it did prove that was the case here.
Yeah, and that's a common theme, actually, throughout all the people we've interviewed, is that failure and how you actually, you learn, you get a huge experience from it that actually makes you become that better person. And that gut feeling as well, something isn't right here, and just to start time to listen to it and stuff. It's great advice.
Well, it's a good point that you make. I think the measure of an entrepreneur, how you really judge the character of an entrepreneur, is not how they handle success, but how they handle failure. Yep. And how they pick themselves up and get back on the horse and just get right back in the game. We don't go crawl off in a corner and cry. We might feel like it.
Yep.
When I was closing the store and losing a considerable amount of money, it never really occurred to me to feel sorry for myself. I'm just like, okay, well, I've learned a lot from this one, and I'll use it in the next business, and that'll just make it even better. So, if you look at all of the entrepreneurs that you hear about, the Donald Trumps, and, even Milton Hershey, Walt Disney, every one of them had tremendous failure. Most of them had gone bankrupt 2 or 3 times. And, Walt Disney went in to try to get a job at a newspaper as a reporter, and they wouldn't hire him because they said he lacked imagination. Now, come on, guys. Really? Walt Disney?
Absolutely. Well, they say that an entrepreneur is someone who's so successful that they can pay for all their failures.
Exactly right. That's a really good definition.
Gee, that's great. No imagination. I love it. Well, let's turn the tables now, and let's look at a particular success story. Tell us about a win in detail that sort of reassured you that you were heading in the right direction.
I've had pretty good success. I can tell you a story about a time that I had a success that was a surprise. And this was back many, many years ago. I did a lot of internet marketing. As Ron said, I was one of the first eBay instructors, and I did a lot of speaking, and I had eBay mastery programs. Well, I had launched a new info product, and as luck would have it, I was scheduled to go on an eBay cruise. I was actually going to be on this cruise teaching people how to buy and sell on eBay. And I didn't realize when you're out in the middle of the ocean, you don't have internet a lot. And so I got on that ship on, I think, Thursday, and we were doing a huge, huge product launch that Friday. And I had everything in place. I had all my, my joint venture partners lined up. I had all my autoresponders. I had my assistant here. I had everything in place. And I figured, okay, I'm going to be out in the middle of the ocean, but I can monitor this. Well, Friday, that launched at noon. I had no internet access. I had no cell phone access. Did not have internet access until the following Monday. So I had no idea whether our launch was a success or if we had sold a single thing. And finally, I get off the boat and I go on this little island and I run into the shop. I'm like, do you have a phone? And they actually had a phone. And I called back to the office and my assistant said, where have you been? We've been trying to get a hold of you. And I'm like, oh, God, how bad is it? How bad? He goes, no, you don't understand. We did $60,000 in 3 days. And I'm like, well, I knew we would do that. But that was a really nice surprise, and that was one of our largest product launches. I think we did about $500,000 off that one info product over the course of about 6 months. So that was kind of a pleasant surprise. And again, I was in the middle of the ocean, and I had no clue.
That's amazing, and I don't know how you're going to top that, but we reached the point where we've talked about a wow moment now, Tim. So this is a part where we look at your journey and see where you had this wow moment, a moment that was so instrumental to your success that you knew you were on your way to a successful business.
A wow moment. You want a single wow moment?
Or a few of them.
Yeah.
Well, we got all the time in the world.
I think the biggest wow moment for any entrepreneur is that moment when you can quit your day job.
Amen.
And actually, and that's what I did. I started my first business, over 20 years ago. And I'll tell you a really quick story. I had a friend named Steve, and Steve was probably the dumbest guy you'll ever meet in your life. But he was a highly successful entrepreneur. And in my mind, I thought, if Steve can do this, I can do this.
Right.
And so I had a little graphic design business on the side. I had my day job. Well, I quit my day job. And I can remember coming home and telling my wife what I had done, and she's like, are you crazy? And I said, hey, if Steve can do it, I can do it. Well, 3 months later, I go crawling back to my boss going, can I have my job back? Because I had failed, and the reason that I failed was because I had no clue what I was doing. Just because Steve might have been the dumbest guy on the planet, but he knew the fundamentals of business. He knew about customer service. He knew about marketing and sales. And so what I did was I went back to my day job, but I became a student of business. This was back before the internet, back when Allie was in diapers, probably 25, 30 years ago. But what I did was I went down to the bookstore. I bought every book on business that I could find. I bought every magazine. Ron, you got that gray hair. You remember cassette tapes, I'm sure. So, I got all the cassette tape programs, and I became a student of business. And about 6 months later, I was ready, and that was really my wow moment. I can remember walking into my boss and say, I'm gonna quit, and he's like, again, you're gonna quit? I'm not gonna hire you back. And I thought, you're not gonna have to. And a few months later, I was well on my way, and that was really the wow moment for me when you can leave that 8-hour-a-day job and start that 20-hour-a-day business. It just really is a wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Tim, I can tell you personally, I love that story because there are a lot of people out there listening right now that are going to work or just coming from work and trying to figure out how they're going to do that for themselves. And, one of the hardest things is, as you probably know, or as I know you know, is the ability to know when you can do that, when it's time to be able to say, I can officially retire from this corporate life, or whether you're running a printing press at a plant or just whatever you're doing, I can officially quit now because I have everything I need in place to run my own business.
It really is it's a life-changing moment. And, one of the things that I do now, I have a radio show called Interviewing Authors, and I talk to authors who are full-time, are highly successful, and every one of them talks about the moment that they were selling enough books that they could quit their day job. So it doesn't matter if you're really an entrepreneur or an author or whatever it is you do, it really is something you work for your entire life. Now, the trick or the key is to be ready when it happens. because, you know, you're not going to quit your day job and work 3 hours a week and have a successful business. You're going to have to put in a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of sweat. So, you know, if that's something you really want to do, and there are days, trust me, even now when I think, wow, it would be really cool just to go to a job, you know, just to have someone else write the check for a day. But I get over that really quickly.
Yeah, I was going to say, it probably doesn't take a whole lot of truth serum to find out.
Well, it does. You know, when I'm sitting in my home studio in my boxer shorts and my flip-flops, you know, you're not going to go to work like that most days.
Well, you can once.
Well, this is true. Yeah, maybe once.
Unless you're a circus clown. Yeah, definitely. Well, and the thing amazing me about that, and that we hear it all the time, is that fear point. There must be a point where, nah, I can't do that. Nah, how can someone like me? I mean, I know you had your friend who you say is the dumbest in the world, but to get past that fear of, because at the moment you have security. Here's my job. I'm getting X amount of money every month, and that's what's going to happen. How did you get past the fear? Is it just you were boredom of your job, or?
Well, you know, I never had fear. I'm one of those weird people that just, I don't worry about stuff. I honestly believe that if you are well equipped and you set your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. And the reason that I failed the first time out is I wasn't well equipped. You know, I just thought, hey, I can do this. How hard can it be? Right. Well, the truth is it's extremely hard. So if you're thinking about starting a business or any kind of endeavor like that, you know, number one, you need to make sure you are really cut out to be an entrepreneur, because not everybody is. You know, we are wired a little differently than everybody else. And I think it's kind of the American dream. Most people think they want to start their own business until they're neck deep in it. And then they realize, wow, this just really isn't for me. And, I teach a 10-week business course. And the very first class, the very first thing I say to these folks is, if I can run you off, if I can change your mind, I've done you a great favor, because I've helped you prevent losing money, losing time. Make sure it's something you really want to do. So, I've never really had a problem with fear, because I'm one of those guys. I try to do all my homework, and when you're well informed and well equipped, you just kind of bust through the fear.
And how do you deal with your time then? Because I used to hear people say that time is important. I never used to realize what it meant until I really got into a business. So how do you deal with your everyday sort of time? How do you allocate, well, this has got to get done, this has got to get done?
Well, you know what I am? I'm a big maker of lists. I will sit down in the morning with my cup of coffee, and I'll make out a list of everything I have to do today. And I do, I do software consulting. That's really my bread and butter, but I also do the radio show, the podcast. I do a considerable amount of writing, that sort of thing. And what I have to do is I have to block off time to do those things. And, I am not an 8 to 5 guy. I can be here in this office till midnight some nights.
Sure.
So, what I do, number one, is I make a list, and then I prioritize things. I'm also a big believer in outsourcing. If there's anything I can put off on someone else, I will do it. That's one of the keys to businesses. There are only so many hours in the day. So as an entrepreneur, you need to figure out, okay, what is my time best spent doing? Is it, is it writing? Is it selling? Is it marketing? Is it talking to customers? What is the best use of my time? Well, whatever that is, that's what I'm going to focus on. And all the mundane stuff, like I said, if I can farm it out, it's going out the door. So I think that's the key is knowing what you're good at, know what makes you money. That's what you as the business owner should concentrate on. And it's the old Michael Gerber cliche. You should be working on your business, not in it. If you're an entrepreneur who owns a Subway and you work the counter at Subway, you're working in your business. Yeah. And it's really hard to grow a business when you're back there putting sandwiches together.
Well,
not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, as long as they're sort of good sandwiches. Well, Tim, we got listeners from all walks of life. We have the accountants, housewives, you name it, they're listening to you. What they want to know is now what a successful entrepreneur like you did in your present career. I mean, when I was in my diapers, as you put it, what jobs did you do before you started all these businesses?
Well, I had a diaper service.
I was your best customer.
You were. No, actually, it's kind of funny when I never went to college. As I said earlier, I came from a relatively poor Alabama family. All I ever wanted to do was to do radio, which anyone who's done radio will tell you will starve to death. But when I was in high school, I wanted to be Dr. Johnny Fever. I don't know if you've ever saw the WKRP in Cincinnati. I had the hair, I had the glasses.
Right.
And my senior year in high school, I went to work full time at a radio station. And I had these, great visions of going to New York and Atlanta or, Chicago and making lots of money as a radio personality. Well, I sucked. I was really bad. And, I had this really bad Alabama accent. My voice was really high. But, that didn't stop me. I stayed in radio for about 4 years and did okay. I never really left the area. But then I met a young lady who told me, if you have any notion of hooking up with me, you got to go get a real job.
Nice.
Yeah, you know how that goes, women, right?
Yeah.
But that's what I did. I actually had the ability to draw. I was just an artist. It was just a gift that I had. And so I ended up getting a job with Boeing, the airplane company. And this was way, way, way back in the early 80s, before computers or any of that stuff, where all of their illustrations were done in pen and ink. And so basically for about 4 years, I drew, they looked like comic books of battle scenes for the Boeing company.
Right.
But that's what really got me interested in the graphic arts. When the computers started to come around, I learned how to use the graphic computer. And about 8 years later is when I left the second time. I started a graphic design company. And we were doing business cards, letterhead, logos, what have you. Then the internet came around, and we morphed into a website design company. We were the first website design company in the state. And it was very much right place, right time. We ended up doing everybody's website work. And that company really, really took off and was just a wonderful company I spent about 10 years in that company. And got burnt out on it. That's when I started doing the internet marketing. Was very successful in that. I've always been a writer, small business advice. I've written in syndicated columns for 5 years. I wrote the book, and that got me interested in corporate speaking. So, and to make a long story short, I went back into radio because I didn't need money anymore, so I could work for free.
Sure.
And that's what got me into podcasting. I was one of the early podcasters. Scott Patton and we were doing eBay shows back years and years ago. And so that's where I am today. I kind of come full circle and back talking on a microphone.
And just so you know, you're iTunes. You're still on iTunes.
That's hilarious because we haven't done that show in like 5 years.
Yeah, your shows are still on iTunes, and I listen to them.
Well, I hope you got some good out of it.
Absolutely.
It sounds like you've had a really adventurous time. I mean, from an early age all up to today, you've been doing lots of different exciting stuff, really.
Well, I have. I've had a really, really good time. I'm kind of. My wife will tell you that I'm somewhat ADD. I get distracted easily. I get tired of things easily, and it's one of the nice things about doing what I do. I can do a podcast in the morning. I can go do some consulting in the afternoon. I can do some writing in the evening. So every day is different. I couldn't do it if it was the same thing every day.
Sounds like a terrible life.
That sucks.
Yeah, someone's got to do it. Well, we've covered the spectrum of your business, but what we haven't covered is what your business is doing today. So tell us, what's exciting about your business right now? What new things are happening?
Well, the most exciting thing that I do, I mentioned it earlier, is I have a program called Interviewing Authors. And I interview authors, quite frankly. It's a duh. Yeah. And the reason I got into that is I wrote a novel a couple of years ago, and I never did anything with it. It was just kind of whenever I get bored at work in the day job, I'll write at night, and that's kind of my therapy. And I wrote a novel. I never did anything with it. Well, about 6 months ago, I thought, you know what, I bet I could sell some books. Mm-hmm. And so I realized I really didn't know a whole lot about self-publishing. I didn't know how to get, readers, that sort of thing. So I started researching, and I just found that there really wasn't a good source out there for information, from an interview standpoint. There are a lot of websites out there that told you how to do it, but I wanted to hear people tell me how to do it. Yep. And so that got me interested, and I actually started this program, I think it was about 3 or 4 months ago. I have interviewed close to 80 authors now from all genres. I mean, New York Times bestsellers down to Hugh Howey, who's one of the most successful self-published authors on the planet. Quite an array And that's really a lot of fun. When I'm not doing that, I do software consulting. This is kind of still the company that I started years ago, the website design company. This is still kind of within that bound. So, that to me is kind of the day job part. The fun part is doing the writing, doing the interviewing with the authors, and trying to keep that going. I'm learning a lot still today.
It's now time for the lightning round, but before we do, let's thank our sponsors.
If you are an online merchant, chances are you've heard of Terapeak. Terapeak helps online merchants like you by providing in-depth analytics to help you pull back the curtain on your competitors' behavior, pricing techniques and strategies, supply and demand, category and product trends, and customer purchase patterns. Sound intense? It is. Terapeak is the leader in e-commerce market analysis, dedicated to helping online merchants grow their business and become more profitable. How cool would it be if you could know the new and emerging opportunities? Terapeak delivers market intelligence that is both meaningful and actionable. Terapeak analyzes over 2.4 billion transactions per year. How many of those will be yours next year? After all, if your competitors see the value in Terapeak, shouldn't you? Go to www.SoYouWannaSellOnEBay.com/Terapeak to sign up today.
Tim, so this is where we're going to ask you a series of questions, and it's your chance to answer those questions as you care to. You can answer them quickly or as elaborate as you want. So what was your biggest fear of starting a business? And I know we talked earlier that you didn't really have a fear, but if there was anything that you might have been slightly afraid of that, when you started this business, what would that have been?
The only fear that I've ever had is really it's disappointing those that count on me. I'm one of those guys. I'll get out there and walk on that tightrope and not even think about it, and then I look back and there's my wife and kids going, "Daddy, what are you doing?"
Right.
So so I think that's always and it still is today. I think you always have the fear. I don't have the fear of failure, because if you have the fear of failure, you don't try. But I do sometimes have the fear of disappointing those who count on me.
Brilliant. So what one piece of advice would you give someone just starting a business that they could really benefit from?
The absolute best advice I could give you, number one, is go to the bookstore, get Small Business for Dummies, and learn how to be an entrepreneur. That's the reason most businesses fail, is the person never learned to be an entrepreneur. They learned about accounting and legalities but they never learned how to truly be an entrepreneur. And that's the one thing. I think if you learn that, the kind of business you start doesn't matter, as long as you are an entrepreneur and you know what you're doing. I've been in a dozen different kinds of businesses, and I think that's proof. You don't have to necessarily be a product expert as long as you're a business expert.
Right, and that kind of ties in with our podcast, because we actually interview successful eBay sellers, and we interview successful entrepreneurs like yourself, because, when you have an eBay business, it really is a business, and the eBay sellers can kind of help you with the shipping and the different formalities of running that eBay business, but the entrepreneur kind of throws in the business spin of things as well. So we try and mix it up and get a good mix of both.
And I think it's important that you do that. I really do, because eBay is one of those things. And again, I was teaching people how to buy and sell on eBay back, early days. But, eBay is that place where you walk a fine line between hobby and business. And it's really, if you're going to do it like a hobby, treat it like a hobby, well, that's great. Just accept the fact that it's a hobby.
Sure.
But if you are going to do it as a formal business, treat it like a business.
Right.
Treat it like your business. I think that's really important.
Yep. All right, so if given the chance to start over, Tim, with the knowledge that you have about your business and even running a business, what one thing would you do differently?
I wouldn't go in the gun business. No, I think it comes down to preparedness, being ready. Don't jump in so quickly. And I think another important lesson is, especially if you've been successful, is don't start to believe all your hype. I did an interview yesterday with a good friend of mine. His name is Mike McAllowitz. He's a really well-known author, speaker, just a super nice guy. He started and sold several multi-million-dollar businesses. And all of a sudden, everybody was telling him, oh, you've got the Midas touch.
Oh.
You know, you're brilliant. And he believed it. And it wasn't too far after that, he had lost everything. And luckily, he's built it back up. But he will tell you, you know, just because you're successful, don't think that it's all you're doing, because there are a whole lot of factors involved. So, you know, be proud of what you're doing, but don't be egotistical. And for God's sakes, don't think you're all that.
Right.
Great advice. So when you started your business, how much confidence did you have you were actually really going to make money from it?
Well, you know, I had a pretty good idea because I had been doing it as a side business for a long time. And I think that's another important lesson. Don't quit your day job until your business is making enough money that's going to support you. And so when I finally stepped out there and started the business, I had been doing it on the side for quite a while. So I was confident that, you know, I could make this amount of money, but if I went into it full time, I could probably amp it up several times, and that's what happened. So just be prepared. Don't quit your day job too soon. Don't think that you're going to jump out there on Monday and be a millionaire on Friday, because it just doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that kind of ties into this next question then, Tim. What research did you do to confirm that your business would stand a chance of being successful?
Well, what you have to do, and this is what I did basically, is you have to do a ton of research. You have to look at your customer base. You have to look at your market. You have to look at all of these factors, your competition. And this is one area where a lot of entrepreneurs they drop the ball because they don't go to the trouble of doing this, and it is trouble. You know, you've got to do your homework. When I was thinking about going into the retail gun business, I knew that I wanted to locate the store in my little hometown here of Madison, but I didn't know what would be the best location. I spent weeks sitting in my car in parking lots watching traffic come and go. You know, watching customers come in and out. I wanted to know, okay, here's a space next to this Walmart. I'm going to sit here for several hours and watch the traffic and see where people go. And, you know, that was just part of the research. I went into every retail gun shop within a 60-mile radius. And so by the time I was actually opening up the store, I knew who my customers were. I had product knowledge. I knew what my competition was doing, and most importantly, I knew what they were doing wrong, and I knew what they were doing right, and I knew what I could do differently. That's the big one. If you don't have a competitive advantage, if there's not something about your business that makes you different, why would people do business with you?
Yeah.
If I can get what you sell right over here for the same price, same customer service, same everything, why would I walk across the street to do business with you? Sure. So that competitive advantage, I think, is always something you've got to think about.
That's amazing thinking. I mean, this is what I love about, especially interviewing entrepreneurs like yourself, is it's the mentality, it's the thinking that you have, and it's like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go out and get what I want. I know I can do it, and I know I can do it better.
Well, you have to have that mentality, because if you don't think you can do it better, you know, nobody has ever gone into a store called "We Do It Halfway Good." You know what I mean? We're half as good as the competition. That's just not going to work. You know, you've got to be convinced that you have a product or service that people are going to pay you money for.
Yeah.
And then you've got to back it up, and that's another area where, you know, entrepreneurs kind of drop the ball sometimes. Is once they get the check, they think that it's over. Well, in truth, your relationship with that customer is just beginning. So you've got to continue that on. I mean, you guys know this. Customer service is just horrible now.
Absolutely.
And, you know, and the reason it's horrible is, number one, we accept it, we expect it. And number two, the entrepreneurs owning the business are not policing their employees. They're not backing up what they should be doing. So.
Well, they're great answers, Tim. That's the end of the lightning round, and it's actually, sadly, it's time to say goodbye to Tim. We'd like to thank our special guest, Tim Knox, for taking the time to come join us today and share with us your amazing experience. I mean, I've picked up some real good stuff, especially that gut feeling, you know, that listening to that gut feeling, and failures, they do lead to successes.
Hey, man, it's been great. I'm exhausted.
We will post all the notes from today's interview on our show notes page, which can be found at www.soyouwantasellonebay.com/show notes/Tim Knox. But before you go, Tim, please tell our listeners who are out there driving down the road or jogging in the park, how can they find you? What's the best way for them to contact you?
Well, if you're out jogging in the park, look behind you. No,
I'm there. I'm the one behind the tree.
I'm really easy to find. If you search for Tim Knox on Google, I pop up. My main website is timknox.com. I have a lot of business advice articles there, a lot of video, a lot of audio. Interviewingauthors.com is my radio show, and that's the website of the same name. So, guys, this has been a blast. I'd love to come back anytime you need somebody to fill the space.
We're always happy to have you, Tim. Well, thanks for the information, and we wish you continued success. From everyone here at So You Want to Sell on eBay, I'm Ali Young.
And I'm Ron LeBeau.
So you're wondering how you can grow your business, yet your website is currently being hosted by one of those website-in-a-box sites. Or maybe you don't have a website. Well, if you're really serious about growing your business, then maybe it's time to get serious about who is hosting your website. Bluehost is your answer. At Bluehost, you get complete hosting solutions for as little as $4.95 per month. And while that is inexpensive, it certainly is not cheap. You get unlimited domain hosting, unlimited space, unlimited bandwidth, and much more. Bluehost has the top-rated 24/7 support team of real experts ready to offer real solutions and advice. And if that weren't enough, at Bluehost, you will never sign a contract. Go to www.soyouwantasellonebay.com/Bluehost today and take your business to a whole new level.
Well, that's a wrap to another awesome show. Don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes at soyouwantasellonebay.com/iTunes. Follow us on Twitter at Your eBay Podcast and Facebook at So You Want to Sell on eBay. And we can always be found at www.soyouwantasellonebay.com. eBay.com.